And we are live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to PHP Dublin, November 2021. Long time no see. Some usual people here I see in the chat already. Hey, Ken, how's it going? So, what to say? That's great to be back and great to have people here and great to have a guest such as yourself, Steve. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks very much for having me.
Yeah, absolute pleasure. So what we're going to do is, before we jump straight into the talk, just a few notes. We have a sponsor this evening. Our sponsor is the journal Media. They are looking for a new developer to join the team, and as part of their sponsorship, we are going to raffle a book this evening. We are going to raffle a copy of Growing Object-Oriented Software Guided by Tests. So the journal is a big fan of, well, basically unit testing and trying to wrangle code so that it makes more sense and make it expressive and improve the design. So we're very happy that this is the prize that's being given away. So what we're going to do for that raffle is, if anyone is interested, please put your name into, just say you're interested in the chat on YouTube, and then at the end we will pick a winner. Okay, so if anyone's interested, just say yes or interested. Okay, so I think that's the prize and sponsorship part sorted, so we can jump straight into the talk. So just as everyone knows, this is going to be a 40-minute to 50-minute talk. Steve is just going to go through it and give a live demonstration, and then at the end there'll be a Q&A session, and I will act as the proxy for the audience. Okay, so well, without further ado, take it away, Steve.
Perfect, thank you very much. I will just quickly share my screen. So Zoom can get out of the way, please. Does this move? Yeah, it does. I'll move on to another screen. There we go.
Well, we don't see it, so it's fine.
Oh, perfect. So thanks for having me. So this is my talk on working with third-party services in Laravel. So I've been working with APIs for a very long time. Various capacities, building APIs for others to consume, building APIs for me to consume, working with APIs others have built, working with APIs. I've done APIs for longer than I can remember, if I'm completely honest. So, who am I? I'm Steve McDougall. You'll see me most places as just Steve King on Twitter, GitHub, and other places. On YouTube as well, I quite often like to stream. And I actually took my wife's last name, which is hence the McDougall and King. So people often get confused about that one. I took my wife's name, but I wasn't willing to give up my Twitter handle. So I'm currently the engineering manager at a Laravel partner called Jump24. Really relatively new to that role. Absolutely loving it so far. I'm a PHP advocate, huge PHP advocate. Used to run a user group myself, ran a few conferences myself as well. And I talk about PHP, stream PHP. I live and breathe PHP, and I've got elephants coming out of my ears, quite obviously. And as you can see, I am a bearded man, quite proud of that, but I have to be because I've got no hair on top. So I thought I'd throw that one out there so people understand that I am proud of this, but this is now gone. So just going to throw this one out there quickly. We're also hiring at Jump24 for a full stack developer to come and join us. Feel free to reach out to me on Twitter, or there's a link on that slide. Pause and go back later on YouTube if you need to. But I'm not going to go into that one too much. So there's many ways to work with APIs in Laravel. The key thing you have to remember is choosing the one that works best for you. What I'm about to show you and what I'm about to do a live demo of is how I found that works really well for me. Take it with as much pinch of salt as you need to, but try and read between the lines on the lessons that you might like to learn from this. So we're just going to jump straight into the code because that's what I do. I don't mind giving talks, but I'd much rather jump in and just show you how to do stuff. So what we're going to do straight away is we're just going to create a brand new Laravel site, and we're just going to call this PHP Dublin for now. There we go. While that is doing all of that magic, all I need to do is come into PHP Storm, brand new project. We are going to be in code sites. Come on, you know you can find it. It's definitely in there. Okay, so we'll try it again. I don't know why PHP Storm always has that issue. So insights, here we go. We have it. PHP Dublin. Perfect. So fresh Laravel install. Nothing more, nothing less. It's just Laravel. I wanted to do a brand new one so you can see, I'm not using anything in the background. This is just working with Laravel directly. So we're going to be using a specific API. I asked out on Twitter for people to give me examples of APIs. And one that came along was this one here called Frequency, which is all about stocks and orders and products and sales. So it's very much, I wanted to get as real to what you might work with on a day-to-day basis as possible. Me showing you how to use JSON type of code placeholder API isn't really very, very useful to anybody, really. So we're going to use this. So the first step is in our Laravel application is let's set to 8. Yeah, that's fine. Thank God it's not 5 anymore. So let's just make sure we enforce Laravel 8. There we go. PHP 8, sorry. There we go. So what we want to do, my first thing is to come to our app directory and just want to quickly make sure, but you can see this okay, can't you? So if we go into app, come down to here, we can create a new directory called services. What I like to do is create a new service within here. And within there, I will say, okay, so what's my service called? So if we go back, it's called Frequency. So this is a name here. I'm just going to grab that as a name. And we're going to copy this and we're going to create a new namespace within here. Frequency, and there we go. So within there, I will create a nice new class. I'm just going to call this service. Very simple, very straightforward. So with Laravel, what you can typically do is you can just use a HTTP facade, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with using just the facade and building it up that way. But what I found in the past of working with services in Laravel is, and in general in PHP, is just using something like Guzzle or HTTP facade. If you change an implementation or if they change how they're working with their URIs and their resource links, then you've got to kind of chase yourself through the application to try and find all of the implementations, and you start tripping over yourself really quickly, really easily, which can become quite a bit of a pain. So the first step that we want to do is we're going to need a constructor. So this is just your standard PHP class. And because we're PHP 8, we're going to do it the right way. And let me just turn off, where is it? GitHub Copilot. I don't want it to, I can't turn it off, can I? We'll ignore GitHub Copilot for this one because nobody likes it. It's trying to steal our jobs. So the first thing that we need to think of here is we want tests, right? So we're going to want to look at doing test-driven development, because what's the point in doing anything unless we're going to write tests? So what I'll do is we're just going to require pest PHP. Then we are going to come down to the tests directory here, and we're just going to delete these very basic ones that aren't good to anyone. Let's get pest all installed. If you haven't used pest PHP before, it's my go-to testing framework of choice. And what I would do is we're going to make that full screen. I'm going to make sure that is moved next to my code, and it is perfect. So if I go into PHP Dublin now, I can do a very quick test. I'm running pest and there's no test executed. That's what I wanted to check. So the first thing I'd want to do at this point is I want to make sure that I can create, start creating this service. So the first thing is with any service, what we want to do is we're going to accept a URI, our base URI of how we're going to access it. And I know for a fact that this specific API accepts an API token as well. So we're going to handle it like that. So that doesn't have to be public. It's probably much better off being protected at this stage. And then we can just increase that to public if we need to. So what we're going to do is we're going to write a quick unit test for this as well. And what we will do is new directory services, and we are going to create a new file. Frequency service test. And we're just going to do a very basic. It can build a new service. Obviously, when you're working with third-party APIs, testing first is the best way to do it. So what we want to do here is before each, we want to basically say that this service is going to be a new service like that. And we will simplify that quickly. Within there, we're going to add in our arguments quickly. So we're going to have a URI, and we are going to have, yeah, Copilot really is starting to annoy me already, and a token. So what we need to do here is basically, these don't matter so much in our tests. This is, because we're going to be faking a lot of this. We just want to make sure that we can build it. So we can just quickly expect this service to be an instance of service class. So now what we can do is just come back to here, write our test, and we can build a new service, and we're good to move on. So we know that our service is working. So when it comes to Laravel, what we need is we want to bind this to the container so we can pull it out where we need to, right? So the first step is always, okay, so how many API connections am I going to have? Am I going to have multiple? If I am, then I'm going to approach this slightly differently. But in this situation, let's say we've just got this one, we would create a very specific service provider for this API. So we'll create a provider. Now we could create a frequency service provider. What I'll do, I will call it a services service provider, which is going to be a bit of a mouthful, but we're going to go for it anyway. So we're going to make a services service provider, and that will be created for us. And straight away, we need to just jump straight down into our config app.php, scroll all the way down to our providers, and just drop this one in here. So we can go app providers, services service provider class, done. So we can now open that one up. And how we want this to work is basically in our register method, we want to register how we want our service to work. So we want to bind, or realistically, we probably want a singleton, because we want the same instance each time. There's no point booting up multiple instances of the same service class, because it's not going to change at all. It's always going to be very standard. So if we can create a new singleton, and our abstract is going to be our service class. And our concrete, we just want a very basic quick function. And we just want to turn a new service. We want a new service. So what we need within there is we will want the URI, and we will want the token. So that means down in our config services, we need to come and make a new entry within here. So our API is called, make sure we get spelling correct, frequency, there we go. And the arguments that we're going to have here are going to be, we've got a URI, which is going to come from env frequency URI, and then we're going to have a token, which is going to be coming from the environment again, and that is going to be frequency token. And that's enough to start us off. So within here, our UI, we can simply say config services frequency dot URI. Within here, config services frequency token, and that is enough to get started. What we need to do now is go to our env file and make sure that we add this information. So right down the bottom, I haven't even set up a database with this project or anything. So our frequency URI, if we come back to our API documentation, if we just go to a random one, so we know that this is going to be everything up to V2 there. There we go. So we can just grab all of that. We can add that in there. Really, did we call that key? No, we call that token. So we can go grab a token. So now I can come over to frequency into my store over here. Go to access tokens. I can create a quick token, create a test token. Copy that, paste that in, and we are good to go. Our environment is now configured. It's passed through our services, which is passed to a service provider, which means that we can now create one really easily, and our service will accept that. So are our tests working? Our tests are working. So next step is inside tests, we want to go to a feature, and we are going to create a new directory called services. Then within pest, import that class. Yeah, that is enough for that. So that in services here, we can kind of copy the naming here. We could probably copy that, paste it in there, and just delete all of that. So here's our new one here. So here's our feature for the service here. So it can get a built service from the container. So we want to make sure that we can get this from the container, because that's the point of a service provider, right? So to do that, we want to say that our service is equal to app, and app takes an argument of abstract. So our abstract is going to be a service class. So what I'll quickly do is test, and we're failing. So argument to token null given in okay, so let's go see what's going on with that service provider. Frequency token. Then if we come down to config services, frequency token, then that is looking for frequency. Make sure things are spelled correctly. Come back down to our env. It's always this part that goes wrong. Initial setup. That should hopefully have solved it. So now we're doing good. So test didn't perform any assertions, but it didn't break basically. So we are now expecting we could probably just grab this, stick that in there. And we can say to be an instance of our service class. We then don't need that part. And let's run our test again. Cool. So we know we can build our service manually, and we know our container can also build it, which is kind of important when you're working with a DI container. I'm sure you can agree with me on that one. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to speed up a little bit here because I don't want to waffle on for too long about the same sort of stuff. So within our services here, what I'm going to do is I am going to focus mostly on the integration, not the testing, because otherwise we're going to go on for maybe a little bit longer than I would like. So here's some, we create our traits. In Laravel, we call them concerns. So typically what I do is I would create a new trait here, and we'd say that we have a fake. And this trait would basically, it's got one thing that it needs to do, and that is public static function fake, and that is going to return void, and then this is going to HTTP fake, and that means that our method here, what we need it to do is we need it to accept the same arguments as what the default Laravel will accept. So that'll be null, callable, and an array. And we're going to call that one callback, which is going to default to null. And then this accepts that callback. So what this is going to do is realize I had a typo in there. This is basically just going to proxy calls to the HTTP facade. So it's going to allow you to add fakes onto your service classes really easily. So what we can do on here is we can say use has fake. And we can now fake requests and our tests really quickly and really easily. And I suppose our next step is to basically look at how we can build our request. So with the Laravel HTTP facade, you can do things like you can add the tokens, you can add in like quite a lot of stuff. So what we need like sensible defaults for our service here. So what we need to do now is we are going to add a default timeout. And what we're going to do is, if I just copy that part there. So we can configure this on an environment basis, or we can set a default with our env. So we can go, okay, so if we don't set it and default to 10, then with the times that we want to retry, we can do retry times. And so by default, I don't do any retry times. I handle the error when it happens. And then obviously, retry interval. There we go. That finally, they gave me a good suggestion. Thank you very much. So there we go. So basically, we can retry requests with a HTTP facade, and basically say, okay, so if we get an exception thrown back from the HTTP client, then retry it, but only retry it X amount of times and every 10 milliseconds or every 300 milliseconds, and it allows you to kind of configure that very nicely and very easily. But that means now that we've got to extend how our service is built, right? So if we come now down to our frequency service here, it means that we now have to accept a few more things. So that is going to be quite simply token. We're going to have a protected int for the timeout. We are going to have a protected null or int for the retry times, and again a protected null int retry interval. So that's nice and easy, which means now all we've got to do is come to our service provider and make sure that we extend that as well. So our first one is our timeout. So we can pretty much, okay, we're going to use that'll help speed this up a little bit. Our retry times is our frequency retry times, and our retry interval is our retry interval. So that is nice and simple. Everything is now all hooked up. However, run our tests and we're going to fail because things aren't hooked up. That's not the end of the world. So all we've got to do is basically, if we just kind of grab that, I can come down to our test quickly, come over to our unit test over here, and I can do that. And we'll just, I'm just going to go test.com. Test. This is an integer. We'll call it 10. And then we're just going to drop those. We can't, can we? Damn it. Okay. Set those defaults in there. So that in here, we don't actually have to bother passing those through. Makes it a little bit cleaner to run. So now when we run our tests, one of them passes and they both apparently pass because one's resolving and one's not. Perfect. So we're good to go. So basically we are now set up, and in our service, we basically just need to now make a way to quickly create a request, really. So what we need is a really nice and simple function, make request, and this is going to create a pending request for us. So we will return HTTP facade base URI, and that is going to accept the URL, which is then going to be this URI. And then our next part is going to be with the token. Now the token is obviously this token. Timeout is going to be what's that accept seconds. So we can go this timeout. So as you can see, it's actually relatively simple to get this part of it set up. Then the retry, we can say times this retry times, and we're going to sleep for this retry interval, and that's it. We just need to return that. You know, this will return a pending request for us to then work with. So every time we get a request, you've got the base URI set, it's got the token configured, it's got the retry interval and the timeout all configured, and we can just call it and get started straight away. It's nice and quick and nice and easy. So one thing we can quickly do perhaps here is we can say it can create a built request. But basically, all we want to check here is that expect this service, make request. We expect this to be an instance of a pending request for us to then work with in Laravel core itself. So that's all we need to do to test this is this at an acceptable level? Apparently not. So facade root has not been set. That is because I am probably doing it in the wrong file now because I haven't booted Laravel. So we are going to go put that in the feature test instead. So instead of that, we're just going to say app service class make request, import that one, and it's still failing. Darn you. Retry argument 1 times with type int null given. Okay. So we can say request is that, and then grab that, and we can say if this retry times not equal null, and this retry interval also isn't null, then we can get our request and tack on that retry, and then return our request. Now we can test it and we're all good to go again. So all we're doing there is splitting that out because it doesn't accept null. It's a nice way to do it is we're building up our base request. Timeout int, we're always going to want a timeout. We're not always going to want to retry. So there we go. That is all set. And our service is able to be built. So the next part is relatively simple. What we want to do is start making requests. So what I found nice here is if we go to our docs, let's pick an endpoint. Let's go for products, for example, list all products. So we want our service to get all products. So what we can do here is public function products. And this is just going to list all of them. So it's suggesting it for me. Come on, don't stop taking the magic out of this for me. So come and watch me get GitHub Copilot to do my live demo for me. So we're going to do a get request to the URL of products. So products, there's a bearer access token, and this is what we should be getting back. So there we go. So we are going to return that, which will return a JSON response. So we're just going to return JSON for now to make it simple. So if we just come back to our tests to make sure that this is working. So we can say it can get a list of products. We'll work directly with the API at first, and then we'll look how we can fake this afterwards. So our response is going to be app. We'll do it this way. Service is app service. Then our response is going to be service products. So we now got our products here. So we can start tapping because we know that's coming back now as a Illuminate HTTP client response. So we know we've got some available methods to us. So we can do things like if our response failed, we don't want to do that. We can throw the response to an exception. Because what this will do, that's not going to work. Give me a second. Let's drop that JSON for now. So that will do, if it's failed, it's just going to throw that request exception for us. So it means that we can handle that nicely here. We don't need to worry about that either. So that means we've got a really nice, graceful way of doing things. Our next step is to go, okay, thanks again, I suppose. But I don't like to do it this way. So I'm just going to quickly install a new package. Obviously, it's one of my packages. HTTP status code is basically just a list that I can use. I can now call HTTP status code and call OK, and we are good. So now I can run my tests, and we've got them. But then what we can do further down the line is we can start to jump into it, and we can say, you know, expect the response JSON to be of a certain JSON type. That's probably out of scope for now. So what we'll look at now is, so what can we do with this? You know, this is great and all, but is that what we want? Probably not. This probably isn't how, yeah, at this point, we're just adding a bit of a pretty wrapper around the endpoint. And that's not really what we're after here. So at this point, we know we're going to be getting collections back. So we can come to here. We can say, okay, so let's create a new class. Or let's create a new directory. Within here, a new namespace. We're going to call this resources. And to start off with, we are going to get a product collection. And what this is going to do, why did I do that? A product collection, and that is going to extend the Illuminate support collection here. And there we go. That's all we need it to do. Simplify that. Add strict types, which is what I like to do. And that's all we need for now. So what we can do is turn this into a response. Say this, make request, get products, great. So at this point, if the response failed, we can throw a different exception. So what we can do within our frequency here, we can create a directory called exceptions. Within here, we will call it a very basic request exception. This is just going to extend a HTTP exception, or sorry, a request exception from, yeah, there we go. It's going to extend that one, but this is more kind of, we're going to get more control over this as we go forward. So now in here, we can throw a new request exception, and we can do that basically. It is just going to let, you know, do it all for us. So thanks. So response to exception, get message, and for this part here, we can just do get code, and there we go. A name parameter, this request exception extends that. It takes a response. Okay, so we can just go response, done. Nice and simple. And then add that doc block with the request exception. So at this point, we can say, okay, so we can return a new product collection here. And the items that we want to pass in is going to be the response collect at that point. So then what we can do here, we know that we're going to return a collection. So now our test will fail, and that's fine. We want that to fail because it's failing because it's not doing what we're expecting in our test. So down in our test down here, what we can do is we get our response there, but what we could do is we say get our products, and we can say expect products to be an instance of products collection class. Make sure we're getting the right thing back. Simplify that. And there we go, we're back to passing again. So that's the basic way to start getting that part started. The next step for us is to look at this data itself. So instead of going, okay, let's just pass the data raw as it is, we can start mapping over this and start creating value objects quite easily as well. So within here in our resources, we've got a collection. We can create a new class as well. We can create a product value object. We can start that one. And we will start that with declare strict types. And what we can do is, if we look at this data here, we know we're going to have ID, SKU, name, price, width, length, height, width, serial number. Yeah, you see that's a Laravel project straight away, right? So what we can do here is we can just start function construct, and we can start to create a value object or data transfer object, whatever it is that you like to call them. So going to have an ID and public string SKU. And then we're only going to add a few minimal things. So we're going to add name as well. So we can come back to here and we can say, what could we do? What could we do? We can go over onto each. For each item, what we want to do at this point is basically return a new product value object. Where the ID, name, and SKU is like that. Okay, I'm starting to like GitHub Copilot that a little bit more because it's doing stuff for me. So now let's just quickly run our test and see if it still works. It died. So why is it dying? Undefined array key ID. Okay, so at this point, let's just quickly die and dump on item and see what's actually happening in there. Let's just comment that out. So we're getting an item. Okay, so we need each item's coming back as an array. So let's collect data. Now run that again. And now we're getting it, which means that we can now just drop that. And this should now hopefully work. And there we go, we're good. So basically all we're doing is we're going to get the response, collect will basically just return a collection of whatever is within the response body by the key that you're asking it for. So in this case, everything under data, give us that back as a collection instead of as an array for it to allow us to then tap into it and say, okay, for each one, or we could turn that into a map if we wanted to, because that would accept the same sort of thing. Map over each one and basically return a new value object for that. And that's just as good. And there we go. That's nice and simple, right? So now what we can do is we're expecting that to be an instance of that. But each item, this accepts a callback. I've not actually used this part before. maybe I'll stick to basic testing instead of jumping too far into past. So we know this is now a collection. So we can say products, each item, not a product collection, but a product value object. Simplify that one so we can see it properly. So each product, we're expecting it to be an instance of a value object to make sure that we're building this correctly with the parts that we need it to do. And there we go. That is another endpoint. That's an endpoint hit. And that's how I build APIs in Laravel, integrate with APIs in Laravel, should I say. So we start off with a service class. We add a way to fake it so that we don't have to keep passing stuff over to the API. We can actually not, if it's a metered API, we don't want to start tapping into the billing. We want to make sure that, okay, we can fake things. We could come over to here. We could grab this as an example, store it as a fixture and start testing against that locally and just get the HTTP facade to act as if it was working as expected. I'd love to go into that more, but I think I am almost out of time. Getting a little bit of a nod there from Barry. I know he's going to get kicked out of the office partway through this. So all we would do next is, I'll give you an example request. So let's say we wanted to get a specific product. So we can say, okay, so public function product. And we know it accepts an ID. And so we can do that. And what we're going to expect that to return instead of a collection is a product value object. So instead, what we can do is we can grab, I would just grab this part first, drop that into there. Let's make this double quoted. So now that I can also say ID. That might throw a new response. That might throw a new exception in case something goes wrong. And next, we're just going to want to return some data. So at this point, we can just say return, or we can just build up this object. We can say object equals this. And then we can return the object. But what we would want to do is come back to get a product by ID. That would give us some data back directly. So response, JSON key ID. Then we can swap that for you. And we can swap this one through for name. And then we can come back over to our test and say, okay, instead of getting a list, we can say it can get a single product by ID. So if I come over to here quickly, I can come to my dashboard, inventory, give me a product like this, 46. I can now go product where the ID is 46. We don't want that. We want that product. So we can grab that part there, replace all of that part there and say, we expect product to be an instance of a value object. And we've already passed, and that's how easy it is. And then you can dive into it further and say, you expect ID to be or to equal 46. Run that test again, and we're good. Now, what we're doing is we're calling an API, validating against a data transfer object, and all that took was literally 2 minutes to add. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to say, that's the end of my live coding. Otherwise, I'll be here all night. Quick quote, integrations can get complicated quick. Find a standard and stick with it. Stick with the one that works for you. And that is quote by some bearded fellow called Steve McDougall, which happens to be me. Thanks very much for listening. I'm on Twitter as Just Steve King. I'm on GitHub as Just Steve King. Feel free to reach out. I love getting feedback on my talks and the things that I do. So thanks very much for listening. And thanks for being patient with me.
Well, Steve, thank you very much for that. That was absolutely fantastic.
Sorry, that was very much a whistle-stop tour of how to work with an API.
No, that was great. That was great. And I think I speak for everyone because the chat was very active on this, that people really enjoyed seeing a live coding and like a live coding session of going from start to finish, seeing the design decisions you were making as you did it, seeing Copilot initially getting in the way, but then beginning to learn and adapt as time went on.
It's the second time I've used Copilot, so it's better than I thought it would be.
Yeah, well, it seemed like it was starting to basically learn what you were trying to do and learn from so pretty handy.
In tests, it's fantastic.
Yeah, well, and also I was very it was very cool to see how you were testing. Like I really enjoyed the tests. So I think we can jump into a Q&A session.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, so just so I've asked the chat for questions. Before we get into that, just like to say that there's usually a lag between the stream and between people seeing it. So to kill some time, what I'm thinking is that we will do the raffle.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm just going to share my screen. And we're going to show all the names that have agreed to this. So where are we going? Share desktop 1. Okay, Zoom is not giving me the access to it because it's the first time I'm using Zoom in this machine. So we're having some technical difficulties here, as is always the way. So instead, what I'm going to have to do is do this, just do this in the background and have everyone trust me. Okay, so we have 5 people that have opted in for this. So I'm just going to run and the winner is, and I'm probably mangling the pronunciation, Monse Foster. So congratulations. So what we'll do is we will send a message to yourself after this. If you can just actually contact either myself or just send your email address or then get in contact and we'll put you in contact with Connor Smith and we'll make that prize happen and come your way. So thank you very much. Oh, sorry, Junior, we didn't get to just seeing this now. So I want to say, well, congratulations on getting the book. And I think we've got our first question here. So the question is, what made you choose Pest over other testing packages?
So I like how Pest allows me to chain these things on really quickly. And yeah, if I was to do that, write any of those tests in PHP unit, for example, yeah, I'd have to create a class. I'd have to create a setup. I'd have to make sure I'm extending the parent of a setup. I then have to create the method, either add an annotation or write how I want the test to be described in, camel case or kebab case, or did some weird formulation. It just takes much longer. Instead of here's a PHP file, very much similar to how you do it in Jest. It string sentence of what it's meant to do in a very wordy format, however you like to put it. Mm-hmm. It means you don't have to think much, and your setup is now just a before each. So it's a quick functional call to say, right, before you run each test, do this, and just that, and that's fine. That's all I need. That's all I want. We're good to go. And the expectation API just speeds up my testing. I can expect this to be something, and then I can dive deep into it, like that very last one with the value object. Mm-hmm. I was expecting it to be an instance of something. Then I can say, okay, so I also want the ID to be equal to this value which I initially passed through. Perfect. What can go wrong?
Yeah, well, that worked out. It looked fantastic.
It's just so fast and fluent.
Yeah, I thought it was great myself. Okay, so I have a question from myself, and it would be around best practice and tests. So the service you were connecting to. So there's the idea that you're connecting to an external service, so it could go down. So would you consider this a unit test, an integration test, and how would you deal with it, say, in a deployment pipeline?
Okay, so if I was to go further into this, what I would do is I would typically work with these requests in a background service. I'd push it off to a background service typically, unless it's something that's needed. But most of the time, you don't want to do a page refresh, which includes calling a third-party API that could possibly fail. Most of the API requests that I do in the code that I write is done in the background to build up data to aggregate information to then give you that insight into. So typically I'd lean on that job queue to do a retry for me. I would probably put that inside a integration test. What I typically like to do is, one of the reasons I write some tests using PEST is I can assert the status. And what that then allows me to do is, if I'm expecting it to be a 500 server died for some random reason, or a 404 doesn't exist, then I can respond to that in the test, and I can test how that actually works and how I'm going to handle that. And what you can do in Laravel, you can fake the event bus, which is a queue in the background, and then if that then fails, you can expect that the bus needs to retry that job. So you can be really specific and descriptive in how you're writing those tests. You can say, okay, so I want to fake the bus. I want to hit this request. I'm going to fake it so that it fails, which I'm then going to expect it to then be retried. And then I'm going to check the bus and make sure that it is, there's something in the bus that's failed, but is also ready to be retried.
Okay. Yep.
That's how I would approach that one.
Okay. That makes sense to me. And would you do anything like, say, with faking payloads in case that service goes down, but you want the unit test to pass? Okay.
All the time. So typically what I do in my tests is I will fake that payload. I actually wrote a package called Laravel Transporter, but I didn't want to do a demo on how to use my package. I wanted to do a demo on why I built the package. In my package, it's literally one class which represents that one request, and it's got fake. You can fake it really easily. And typically what I do with that one is you can fake it and you can say, okay, so give me this fake data back, but give me this response code back as well. So you can be very specific on how you're testing those requests. So you can say, okay, so I want to fake this in this instance, in this test case, I want to fake my request. I want it to fail with this status code. And I want this to be the fake data that you're going to give me back when it fails. And what it does under the hood, it returns a response back, a server response back, exactly as you've asked for it. And then you can test how your code will handle to that as well.
That's great. Perfect. Okay, well, I think we've got time for one more question, and we do have a question here from Connor Smith. So he asks, when writing more tests to cover other cases, have you run into trouble testing how the application handles HTTP timeouts, connection failures, etc.?
No, because what I typically do, I fake those things. What I would do is I will fake how I handle a timeout, because I'm never actually testing against that third-party service. Usually, in this instance, I did because it was quicker. But usually what I do, I'd fake the response data coming back, and I'd fake a delay to see how I handle it, and I'd fake a failure so it can be retried. I basically kind of almost like write a playbook script of, this is a worst case scenario. This happens, then just fill that in with tests around those steps happening and make sure my code responds the way that I want it to.
That makes sense. So basically, given this failure scenario, expect this output.
Yeah, basically, I use it in a very behavior-driven way, but I'm not using something like a cucumber test or anything like that. It's just I'm expecting my API to behave this way. So
Yep.
this is what I'm going to test around.
Yeah, makes perfect sense to me. Okay, I don't see any more questions here. And as we've also professionally said that I'm being ousted from the office because we close at 7. Yes. Hey, we do this in our free time. But wanted to say, first of all, thanks to everyone for attending. For some reason, I looked at the chat there. I don't know why I did that, but also want to thank yourself, Steve. That was absolutely fantastic, and I really appreciate it. Yes, well, we have one more question, I think. We got time for that. When are you writing a book on APIs?
I've been asked this before. Soon. I need to find time to do it. Currently, I'm streaming twice a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays for 2 hours at a time. I've also got a full-time job, 20 open source packages I manage, and 5 kids at home. So finding time to write a book at the minute is quite hard.
Okay. Good luck with all of that. Wow. Okay. Oh, I feel bad that I'm going for pints now. Well, I'd like to say again, thank you very much. And
not a problem.
And to anyone watching, first of all, I'd also like to thank our sponsor, Journal Media, again. As I said, they've got a position going, and congratulations to Monse Foster for winning our prize. And Ken wants to know where you find the energy because he wants some. You don't have to answer that. And I think the answer is you don't.
No.
And yeah, thanks again, everyone. And I will talk to you all at the next PHP Dublin.
Thank you very much for having me.
Absolute pleasure.
Bye.